Creative Babble.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile. With the price of just about everything going up, we thought we'd bring our prices down. So to help us, we brought in a reverse auctioneer, which is apparently a thing.
Mint Mobile Unlimited Premium Wireless. How to get 30, 30, bit to get 30, bit to get 20, 20, 20, bit to get 20, 20, bit to get 15, 15, 15, 15, just $15 a month? Sold! Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. New customer offer for first 3 months only. Speed slow after 35 gigabytes if network's busy. Taxes and fees extra. See mintmobile.com.
Hey guys, this is Javier. Can you believe it? I am working on season 22, 8 years of pretend. I can't believe it, but season 22 is going to be great. It's going to be a collection of stories that I've been actually reporting on for multiple years, and some new investigations, and some investigations that went bust and right in my face. It fell flat, but I'm not giving up. But while I'm working on the new season, I wanted to play a story that's really the most Americana story that I have in my catalog, and it's the story of David Crow and his father. It's called The Paleface Lie. And when I originally aired this series, it was a part 1 and part 2. I'm going to air them both together today. If you've never listened to it, it is a powerful story. Really, truly an unbelievable story. And if you have listened to it, but it's been years, I just listened to it again just to remind myself of the story. And it is just as fascinating now as when I first learned about it. So without further ado, here is The Pale-Faced Lie. I would imagine that most people, when they think of their earliest childhood memories with their father, they're probably thinking about throwing the football back and forth on the lawn, or a weekend camping trip, or maybe even going over math homework at the kitchen table. For David Crow, things were a little different. He wasn't just his father's child. He was also his criminal accomplice.
I have an expression, childhood is a city you can never leave. And when you have a hard enough life, you grow to think that you deserve it, that you can do no better, you are no better.
David Crow is the author of a book titled The Pale-Faced Lie. It's a story about a father and a son living a life of crime. The father, who goes by the name of Thurston Crow in the book, was a violent, convicted felon, and his son David was always by his side. The book follows a young David and his 3 siblings on a Navajo reservation. But David Crow is not a Navajo Indian, and he sure as heck wasn't Native American. His father, Thurston, was an outlaw working in the reservation as a way of hiding from his enemies.
And I was raised to think you'll never be anything. You're just the son of this terrible guy, and you'll do terrible things because he'll tell you to do them, and you won't break that cycle. And it was a hard cycle to break.
Imagine if the one person you trusted the most in this world used you to commit crimes. That's what David says happened to him. His father was an ex-con. He was cruel, violent, and possibly a murderer. And David says he was right by his side the entire time. I'm Javier Leiva, and this is Pretend. Stories about real people pretending to be someone else.
This episode is brought to you by Polestar. There's only one true way to experience the all-electric luxury SUV Polestar 3, and that's to take a test drive. It can go from 0 to 60 in as little as 4.8 seconds with the dynamic handling of a sports car. But to truly understand how it commands the road, you need to be behind the wheel. Up to 350 miles of range, the 3D surround sound system by Bowers & Wilkins. It's all something you have to experience to believe. So book your test drive for Polestar 3 today at polestar.com.
Hey, this is Whitney. And this is Melissa from Colts, Crimes, and Cabernet. We wanted to share some exciting news with you. On our journey of navigating advocacy through this true crime space, we believe that the name Colts, Crimes, and Cabernet no longer reflects our position on ethical true crime content.
As much as we have grown to love our original name and our journey to get here, our evolution from that first glass of wine between friends to meeting with family members, survivors, and fellow case advocates has forever changed our stance.
We're committed to amplifying the voices of victims, survivors, and experts who are fighting for justice and change in the criminal justice system. We're here to empower you to also become advocates for change, no matter where or who you are.
That being said, we would like to introduce you to our new name, Navigating Advocacy.
We invite you to join us in navigating advocacy through the murky waters of true crime. Let's make a difference together.
We'll see you next week on Navigating Advocacy, available wherever you get your podcasts.
So I'm in college, and my father has run off with an 18-year-old Indian woman that he met through his job. So one day, like a Saturday afternoon, I get a phone call. Lived in a fraternity house, one phone for 80 guys. Somebody opens the phone and comes and finds me and says, there's a woman on the line and she's absolutely frantic and says, you have to come to the phone. I get on the phone and it's the woman my dad's living with. And she says, you have to save your dad's life. You've got 5 hours to get to Wheeling, West Virginia.
At this point in his life, David was a college student in Maryland. He had a 5-hour drive ahead of him from Maryland to West Virginia.
And she gave me instructions. You'll come up on this road, and gave me the road. There'll be a bank of phones and there'll be a truck stop. So you can't miss it. So I got there, sure enough, big truck stop. I go to the phone, call a number. It's getting pretty close to dusk at this point. My dad comes in a car with two guys I don't know, but they do not look like nice guys. And he says, what you need to do is, he gets in my car, is follow these guys down this long dirt road and turn off your lights as soon as you turn on the road. And I'll use a flashlight and we'll drive slow.
David could feel his shoulders tense up and his palms begin to sweat. He knew that there was trouble almost immediately. They drove down about a half a mile, but it felt like forever.
And he stops and he says, I want you to keep your headlights on for 1 minute and I'll swing my hand. So it's still dusky, I can see. And so he and these two guys open a trunk, and there's about a 6-foot, looks like a human body to me, wrapped in a tarp. And they go and they start digging and digging and digging, bury this tarp and cover it up, put leaves on it and all that. So my dad runs in. We had a signaling system when he was a thief. If I blink 3 times, there's huge trouble. Twice, beware. 1, just keep your eyes open. So I knew the signal, didn't know any of the other circumstances other than I know my dad and I know this, he's not burying wood.
How many times did he blink?
He didn't blink because nothing came up. I'm terrified because I realize he's burying a human. He buries whatever he buries. He comes back to my car and I see blood, and there's blood on a duffel bag, and he throws it in my back of my car. He gets in and we start. My dad has complete control of me. He's always had complete control, right? And he starts saying, I want you to drive very slow. The guys behind me are going to drive left. You're going to drive right. You're going to go very slow.
Then they slowly started to drive back to College Park, Maryland, where David went to college. He and his dad started arguing.
First time I've ever really talked back. And I said, that had to be a human body. And he said, none of your damn business. I said, sure it is. I'm an accomplice. He said, you're not an accomplice to anything. You're just an idiot son that I own, and you're going to drive and you're going to shut up. And I said, well, I can tell that's human blood on your clothing. There's human blood on that duffel bag. If a policeman stops us, there's evidence the body had been in the other car. So we're arguing the whole way back. And my dad, very much of a criminal mind, is explaining to me the code. If somebody crosses you and you kill them, they had it coming. it's okay to kill if the reasons are the right reasons. And we're arguing and fighting and driving. And we get back to where he lived. And I got out and I said, I'm never doing anything for you ever again. And I should go to the police. And he grabbed me by the throat. He's built like an NFL linebacker. And he said, you'll do anything I tell you to do, boy. I own you. He shoved me back in the car and he drove off. So as you can imagine, Javier, for the next days, weeks, even a few years, I woke up every day thinking I'm going to get arrested. And every day I'm thinking I should go tell somebody. But I didn't do either one of those things. It ruined several years. I broke up with a girl I probably would have married because I said, you don't want anything to do with my family.
But this incident, disposing of the body, wasn't the first time that Thurston got his son David tangled up in a crime. These kinds of things just happened all the time, as long as he remembered.
My first memory, we're on the reservation working. He's working this job is we have to get rid of your mother. She's crazy. And if you grow up with her, you'll be crazy too. We have to get rid of her.
And get rid of her, meaning kill your mother?
Yeah.
And how old are you at this time?
4.
You're 4 years old. Holy crap. That's when you're forming your first memories. So your first memory is your father telling you that you got to get rid of your mom.
Yeah.
I have a hard time remembering when I was 4 or 5, but I remember a glimpse of it.
You would remember if it was incredibly traumatic. Thank God, I hope you did not have that. But when you have extreme trauma at an early age, it does things to you that can't be undone. And when your father tells you, we have to get rid of your mother, and you know what he means, you're scared from that minute on. It was never a peaceful moment from that moment on.
And did he ever try to carry through with that idea?
Oh, yeah. When I was 10, he almost did it. Very lucky that she didn't get killed.
David told me that his father abandoned his mother when he was 10 years old. She was out doing something away from the house that day, and his father took him and everything in the house. I mean, everything. He took the rent money, all the food, and even shut off the heat. But before they left, Thurston did one last thing.
Gallup is in the San Juan Basin. It was a huge coal mining area for a very long time. And the hills are very steep. It's almost San Francisco steep. So he cut her brake linings, and we lived up on a hill. And he figured that she'd hit the brakes and somebody would kill her. My mom, God bless her, still alive at 92, if you can believe that, was quite mentally ill. Mom's loved her to death, but very mentally compromised. She was terrified. She's alone. She's in a broken down car. My dad expected after we abandoned her that he would read that she was killed and he could conveniently be rid of her.
But she didn't die, and she refused to leave the house.
So he took me back to the house where she was abandoned, our previous home. And I see her sitting in the living room. There's a dirty mattress. She's wearing really thin clothes. This is February, and the reservation gallops up between 6,500 and 7,000 feet. We have real cold winter, very cold. So house is freezing. She's shivering. She's sitting in the corner, an absolute look of hopelessness, which I never knew what that meant, but her face was completely vacant. And so I walked in. My dad said, go see if your mom's there. And she was there in that living room. And I had what I think is a nervous breakdown. I just started crying and shaking. That's my mom. And my dad came in behind me because I'd been in the house too long. My mom jumped up and ran to me, grabbed onto me, said, my oldest son, you can't leave me. You've got to go out and be the man of the house. My dad comes in behind me, slams her to the ground, rips me away from her, hits me hard. She's in a fetal position crying. We get in the car to drive away, and he hit me with his elbow in the head. I never felt it. I couldn't feel anything. And that is the moment in my life I broke. Something broke inside me, and it took me all the way to my early 50s to understand what happened and to begin the repair.
Remember, when all this was going on, David was just 10 years old. From that moment on, he lived with his dad, and so did his siblings.
They didn't get dragged into the accomplice stuff, but he was very vicious to them. There were sexual things with my sisters, and my brother, who didn't understand and go along, got beat even worse than I did. But we were both beat within an inch of our life with buckle into the belt all the time.
According to the 2020 census, nearly 80% of mothers get custody of their children. It's very rare for a father to get custodial rights, but according to David Crow, this issue was handled outside the courts. Did your mother file charges against him or try to claim custody?
My mother was more of a child than we were by the time I was 6. She was easy to take advantage of, and he did. And we knew that if we went with our mom, that he would come back and kill her. At some point, if we weren't in separate houses, she was not going to live. And I knew that. And I knew that my siblings couldn't take any more of what was going on.
So now David was living with Thurston, his father, but he wasn't seen as a son. He was viewed more as a partner in crime. That's how his father always treated him. But now, with his wife and his kids' mother out of the way, there wasn't any restraint. Nothing was holding Thurston back. What kind of things did he make you do?
So the Navajo Indian Reservation is bigger than West Virginia, and he's the inventory and safety engineer for the tribe. So there was warehouses spread out all over, and each one of them had like power saws and screwdrivers, all kinds of stuff. So what he would do is steal just enough from each warehouse that no one really knew that there was that much missing. So we would drive up to these warehouses on Saturdays, and we had a very elaborate system. These are corrugated steel Quonset huts. So he would pull up, and I would sit in the car, and my goal, I had to watch to see if anybody's coming. Could there be danger? Could there be somebody who could catch us? And of course, the car looks like a pinhead when you've got a wide, flat area and dust kicks up. So you really don't know. So I had 3 rocks in my hand, and if I threw one rock and it hit, he could hear it inside. That meant, okay, be alert. Be alert. There might be trouble. If I threw 2 in a row, boom, boom, that meant I'm worried and I want you near the front door. If I threw 3, boom, 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 run to the car and let's get the hell out of here.
I can just imagine Thurston and his son David sitting around a fire after a long day of looting and stealing. What did these two talk about? School, homework, girls? Nah. Thurston told his son stories about murdering a guy in prison. Not exactly bedtime stories, right?
And he told me about a couple of guys he killed in fights that no one knew. And I would trick him, if you will, into telling me more and more about his San Quentin life. There are times he didn't want to talk about it, but there are a lot of times when I could kind of, so what happened next, Dad? And he would just tell me these stories. And I remembered them, right? And they're really gruesome stories. I mean, San Quentin's not a fun place.
San Quentin, by the way, is one of the most infamous male prisons in the United States. One of its most well-known inmates includes cult leader Charles Manson. There's even an excellent podcast called Ear Hustle produced inside the prison. Anyway, back to the story. And so now you're kind of stealing equipment from the reservations. What other papers did he send you on? That you just...
It was almost always stealing, but we would game play. We'd be driving along. So these vast rural areas. And we one day, give you just one example. We're driving along and there's a Navajo man walking, and he's probably miles from where he left and miles to go. And Dad would say, okay, I want you to tell me the last 3 license plates of the cars that came towards us, past us, where's the nearest police station? If we kill him, where would we put him? Who's going to find him? Who do you think will be the first person to come upon the body? Why? And if I didn't answer right, he would get extremely mad at me. So I got to the point where I could game play with him. It just did it to survive, right? But he constantly did that. When we went into any public place, he never sat near a window where he could be seen.
There was always an entrance or an exit. David's job was just to sit there, face the window or the door. He was the lookout. If he saw something unusual, somebody that didn't look like they fit in, or somebody looking nervous, he had to alert his father. And they had a very elaborate alert system.
We had a system where he had lock boxes that he buried and lots of P.O. boxes where he got secret mail. And in our system, he'd say, you have to memorize these lock numbers. So Lockbox number one, the code was Mickey Mantle. So Mickey Mantle's best year he won the Triple Crown, he batted .354. He had 56 home runs, and he had 114 RBIs. So I would know Mickey Mantle, and we had different systems, and I would memorize them. And this went all the way through high school. And he would always say, if I disappear, don't come back. I want you to go through these lock boxes and go get some. I'll leave something behind so you'll know who to go kill. It was just crazy stuff, but you had to answer him right. You had to give him the right answers.
Why you? Why did he pick you and not your younger brother or not your sister? Why you?
I was the oldest boy, but second kid. So I hate to say this, I was the one most like my dad. I understood him. I completely understood him. I didn't like it, but I understood him. If you called my brother and said, I have this biggest secret in the world, can't tell anybody. Now, I don't mean something like you killed somebody, but like, I'm afraid I'm going to get fired. I'm afraid my wife's mad at me. I'm afraid, something like that. He would immediately call that person and tell them, I love my brother to death, but there's no filter on him. And so it got to a point where you never told him anything. And if I told him, he'd tell, and then I'd get beat up. My sisters were somebody he could abuse and beat, but he never trusted him that way.
Thurston saw David as his heir. At a certain point in his teen years, David said he knew what his father was thinking even before he did. That's how in tune he was with him.
He had a blood vessel that came right between your eyes. It's in your forehead. And if it bulged like a garden hose and his eyes bugged out, I call it the YV because the vein looked like a Y and the eyes bugged out like a Volkswagen Beetle. You knew he was extremely angry and something very bad is about to happen. And you couldn't stop him if he got to that point. I'd study him, and if I could catch him before that happened, I might be able to talk him down or convince him not to do what he was going to do. But if he ever hit the YV, it's over. And so I knew that. I understood him. I tried to protect my siblings best I could. Mostly I couldn't and didn't. You just couldn't. But there are times I was able to deflect things, get somebody out. One guy tried to challenge him, and I jumped up in front of the man and said, look, unless you want to die or kill him, walk away. And the guy did.
You paint this picture of your father as this monster, which he very much sounds like a monster, right? But did he have another side to him? Was he always this despicable person?
Well, inside he was, but Dad was two things. He was very bright. He just had a super high IQ, and he read a lot, he remembered. The other thing is he was incredibly manipulative. When he wanted to get something from you, he could charm a snake. He was a huge BSer. And of course, the further he moved up any food chain or any work, people see that. It's like I get on the phone, Javier is the smartest man I ever met. You're incredibly great. My God, you must be a billionaire. I mean, he would just throw this crap out. And it either worked or no one cared, but he could throw on the charm. And he had good charisma, very good IQ, and a very good presence. But it was always to get something from you or somebody, and it was something that they would not want to give. We never went to any bar, restaurant, anywhere where he didn't try to pick up a woman, and he'd be there with his kids. Next thing you know, he's lending her money, buying her things, getting her an apartment. There must have been 100 of those. And you'd be there and you'd just be embarrassed, right? You're just like, oh my God. But he never let up.
I mean, my show's about con artists. Would you consider your father a con artist?
The best. He had the talking the chief psychiatrist and the warden in San Quentin into letting him out early. And he told me that talking his way out of San Quentin was simple. And I have to believe him. He got out pretty fast, and he got the chief psychiatrist on his side. And he told me, it's so easy to trick the psychiatrist. You tell him exactly what he wants to hear. Had a terrible childhood, and all these things went wrong. And I didn't really commit the crime I committed. Somebody did this to me and forced me to overreact. And he told me at one point, the chief psychiatrist had tears in his eyes, and he would go back to his cell and laugh his head off. He was very bright, very manipulative. He was brilliant, and he knew what they wanted to hear.
I asked David if he could give me access to anything that could verify his story. I wanted to make sure that the documents backed it up. I asked for prison records, anything I could use to double check it all. But many of the stories that David is telling us is all anecdotal. It's just the way he remembers everything unfolding. It's almost impossible to fact check this story. However, David spent many years amassing public records and other documents trying to put the pieces together.
The other thing I did is I tracked down his accomplice's son, and I tracked down his first cellmate's son in the fish tank. Took years to do this. I went to San Quentin and got myself an interview with the warden, obviously not his. I have all his prison records. You have his parole picture with the California prison number. I went back and talked to everybody I could ever talk to. So the only anecdotal part is who he might have killed and got away with before I was born. You'll never know. I believe him, but I tell you, he told me. In other words, I've spent enormous amount of energy fact-checking, verifying, going back through every single thing.
Next time on Pretend, David's father tries to kill his next wife, and David says that he came up with an elaborate plan to stop him. Previously on Pretend, we heard the story of David Crow and his criminal father, Thurston. My show's about con artists. Would you consider your father a con artist?
The best.
David Crow is the author of The Pale-Faced Lie, a memoir about growing up as his father's criminal accomplice. In the previous episode, David describes the time he helped his father bury a body.
Looks like a human body to me, wrapped in a tarp, and they go and they start digging and digging and digging. And I said, oh, I can tell that's human blood on your clothing. There's human blood on that duffel bag. If a policeman stops us, there's evidence.
David's father, Thurston Crow, lived a life of crime, stealing, lying, and killing anyone who stood in his way. And right beside him, the whole time, was his young son, David.
We start driving, and Dad and I start arguing. First time I've ever really talked back, and I said, that had to be a human body. And he said, none of your damn business. I said, sure it is. I'm an accomplice. He said, you're not an accomplice to anything. You're just an idiot son that I own, and you're going to drive, and you're going to shut up.
This is one man's story of overcoming a life of crime and trying to make sense of why the one person he trusted the most in this world took advantage of him. I'm Javier Leiva, and this is Pretend. Stories about real people pretending to be someone else.
Meta AI is the personal AI to help you with whatever you need. Plus, it meets you where you are. Not only is Meta AI now an app, but it's also on the apps you already know and love: Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, and Messenger. Plus the Ray-Ban Meta glasses. It's easy to access wherever you are. So whether you're talking or texting, Meta AI is convenient to use throughout your day. Experience our newest AI that's tailored to you by downloading the Meta AI app. Try the Meta AI app today on the Apple App Store and Google Play.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive, a leader in boat insurance. Welcome aboard to Carefree Boating. Here, we don't worry about the what-ifs, because we explore with Progressive Boat Insurance for as little as $100 per year for a basic liability policy. Progressive also offers a variety of other coverages and can help you cover repair costs when you need it. And with discounts like multi-policy, safety courses, responsible driver, and more, your mind can really float free. Cruise on over to Progressive.com to get a quote today and see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Rate and discounts not available in all states or situations.
He was a complicated guy, bright guy, but a true psychopath and a true coward.
You were always his accomplice in a way.
Always. And I always knew it was wrong. And I always knew if I didn't break free, I'd wind up like him. And Dad and I went through several discussions were very heated after that. I told him I'd never do his bidding again ever, and I didn't know what he had gotten me into. And he always justified everything he did. He'd say, you see, the white man stole the Navajos' land, stuck them on a reservation, gave them rules, makes them do all these things. So we're stealing from the people who stole from them. We're not doing anything wrong.
It's a way to justify. Thurston Crow would tell his son, remember, you're a Crow, a Cherokee Indian of superior intelligence and courage. During dinner, Thurston would tell stories about how his Cherokee parents struggled to survive and the vicious white son of a bitches who abused them. And for a long time, David believed it. But David didn't look anything like the other kids in the reservation. His dad explained that they were the pale kind. But now looking back, it's clear that his father was just a pale-faced liar. Throughout his childhood, different women came in and out of their lives.
Dad was a huge womanizer. He found a lot of women that were in marginal jobs, right? A minimum wage waitress, you're cleaning hotel rooms, you're stocking shelves. You have no real future. You have no education. He knew how to prey on them. He knew how to tell them what they wanted to hear. But the truth is, he was just preying on very poor people who had nothing going.
But one woman, who David calls Mona in the book, stuck around. One day, out of nowhere, his dad came in and announced that he was getting married. Mona was a nurse and a strict disciplinarian, which is funny because these kids grew up with no rules. David says she didn't even smile, she didn't hug, and her eyes were cold. Thurston didn't love her. David wondered, why would she want to be the mother of these three little monsters? David just didn't understand. What's in it for this lady? But David's father's motivation was perfectly clear.
So my stepmother had money. She inherited land, and she had a federal job of high rank. So if you get rid of her, you get her pension, you get her land. He hated women, basically. And you can start womanizing. You've got all her money and her land. You can do anything you want. So if you're a psychopath and you're not invested in your spouse or your kids, they're just chattel. They're just things you can use. And you get sick of them. They certainly get sick of you. And he just never ending.
But how did it go down? Like, what was his plan?
Well, his plan was she owned some land on the Outer Banks of North Carolina, and some of it was in a swampy area.
It's now 1981. All the kids are grown and living on their own. David moved to Washington, D.C., and was working as a lobbyist. Everything was going fine until one day David's sister called. He says he could barely make out what she was saying. Something about, you're the only one who could save her. He tried to calm her down.
What happened was my sister called me and said, Dad's going to take me to the swamp.
The plan was to convince Mona to clear the brush on the swampy part of their Cape Hatteras property in North Carolina. And when she turns her back,
he hits her in the head with the shovel, chops her up, cuts a hole in her stomach so she doesn't float, puts her in bags, puts heavy rocks in it, and my sister drives her out of there, and no one ever saw her, and we don't know what happened to her.
You know, I don't understand why Thurston would tell his daughter this, but David believed her. He said his sister was hysterical. She worried that if she didn't help, he would kill her too.
He's going to take our stepmother there. He's going to kill her. I'm going to drive him out of there. He's going to hide in my trunk. And we're going to say we were together all day. We never saw her. We don't know anything about where she was. So my sister was going to be dragged into this. And she called me, said, you need to help me stop him.
But maybe there was more to this plan. David thought if Dad got his sister involved in a plot to kill Mona, then he knew that his sister would call David.
She knew that my sister would call me. He wanted to draw me in. I think he actually wanted to kill me.
David says his dad hated him more than anyone else. He was jealous of David's success.
He had reached a point with me where I'd gone against him enough times, and in his convoluted mind, I had done much better than him in my career, and it was time to get rid of me. And I knew that, and I understood how he thought. I understood how he used accomplices. I understood everything about him.
Thurston's plan was to kill him and Mona. Then he would keep her house and her money. Maybe David should call Mona and warn her, but he says that won't work because she wouldn't believe him. And he says calling the police wouldn't work either because that would only make things worse.
I understood everything about him. Scary, but it saved me. And I devised a plan.
And what was the plan?
All this is going to happen on the Outer Banks. He thought that I would go down to the Outer Banks where all this happened and stop him. But I knew that he hadn't left for the Outer Banks yet, and he was still up in Washington, D.C. area, lived in a house about 5 miles from where I did. And I knew I had to stop him before he ever went down there. And I knew he didn't know that I knew he was there. And so I came up with a plan that I think is a dynamite plan. It worked. I used every trick he taught me against him.
David wrote a series of letters detailing the murder plot. One letter was addressed to the Hatteras Police Department. The other letters were for the local paper, 2 separate neighbors, and the last letter was for the FBI. He gave the letters to his friend and instructed her to mail them if she didn't hear back from him by Monday. The letters were an insurance policy to make sure his father didn't get away with it. David tells me that he knows exactly what makes his father tick. His plan was to stop him using everything he taught him. There was only one last thing for him to do. He drove to his father's home in Virginia the night before the murder. He snuck into the garage, loosened all the bolts in his father's car, poured sugar down his gas tank, and if that wasn't enough, he wedged a potato into the tailpipe. Before he left, he taped copies of the letters addressed to the police, the paper, and the FBI to his father's windshield. The last letter was a forged confession that appeared to be written by Thurston Crowe. If only he could see his father's face when he discovered it the next morning. But one thing was for sure. There was no way in hell that he would even try to attempt to hurt his sister or Mona. After he left his father's house, David called his sister and told her to stay put. If Dad asks, tell him you have not heard from me. He'll be furious. His sister was worried that her father might try to hurt her, but David said, don't worry.
My stepmother, she was a strange woman in so many ways. She's smart enough, but just zero people skill. And after my father attempted to kill her and all that, she pretended it never happened, and my sister and I made the whole thing up. But it was a very difficult time for me, but I understood him and I understood how to stop him.
I have to admit, this is a wild story, but that's what David says happened. Those letters never arrived at the police station, it never hit the media, and there are no public records to corroborate this murder attempt. But he told me that this is all very real. He said he waited his whole life for his father to make the next move. He wasn't worried that Thurston would physically harm him. After all, by now, his father was a frail old man. He was worried that his father would retaliate by destroying his political career in Washington. That would hurt the most. But years passed and nothing. No word from Dad. He didn't hear from his father again until 1983. Thurston called and acted like nothing ever happened. He asked, why am I the one who has to call you? Years passed and the old man became weaker and weaker. His heart was failing him. His wife Mona's mind started slipping, and eventually she was diagnosed with dementia. There was no one to take care of him.
Towards the end of his life, when I became his legal and medical guardian and got him through his last years, and I told him I was going to do all this, and I fact-checked him against, he's extremely angry. You're never going to write this book. I said, oh, yeah, I am, but I'll wait till you're gone. And you're an atheist, and you don't care, and you're not there anyway, and so I'm going to do it. And I laid this all out for him. And he may have hated it, but I'm the only kid that talked to him, and I was his legal and medical guardian. I actually fact-checked with him for about 2 years. And he didn't like it, but I was the only one who would speak to him.
Every story has a hero, and every hero needs a sidekick. In the comics, the sidekick is not just a placeholder or an accessory to the protagonist. The sidekick plays an important part. Their job is not to outshine the hero. Their job is to save the hero from themselves. But they must do it without stealing the show. Remember, the hero always has to remain the center of attention.
And he'd brag about stuff, and a lot of stuff were lies. I had to figure out what he was lying about and what he wasn't. There was a lot of tells. He would raise his voice and puff his chest out, and you knew he was lying. But there's times he would repeat things enough. This isn't easy.
Sure, David admits that he was an accessory to some of his father's crimes, but he says he never let his father's morals become his own. He eventually made a name for himself in Washington, D.C., and no one around him even knows about his past. But being his father's foil came at a price.
I broke up with a girl I probably would have married because I said, you don't want anything to do with my family. And she said, oh, well, we'll understand. No, you won't. And if you do, you're crazy. But it was a defining moment in my life. And it's something I kept back all the way till I was in my early 50s when I started writing the book.
After David Crow published his memoir, The Pale-Faced Lie, he received a lot of praise. But some of his readers were horrified to read some of the crimes he helped his father commit.
You belong in prison. You're a horrible human being. You're just despicable. How do you live with yourself? And, you know, the answer I would give, I did then, did now, is from the time I was 4, my dad controlled me. He was built like an NFL linebacker. He beat my brother and I with the buckle end of a belt till we couldn't walk. And he was very bright and very controlling. And it took all the way to that moment for me to break free of that. And no, I did not do the right thing.
David tells me that his life could have turned out completely different.
I went to San Quentin and met the warden and got a tour. And he said, you should be really proud of yourself. 3 out of 4 guys that go up with a violent con are in the prison cell nearby. He said, you never did anything violent and you should be very proud of that. And my whole life has been about break the cycle. But obviously it took a long time. I think one of the strengths of the book is the honesty. I don't ever portray myself as holier than thou, better than my circumstance, or I was so brave. Sometimes I was brave, a lot of times I was weak, and sometimes I was just a flat-out coward.
Maybe it just wasn't in your nature, you know?
Well, none of the kids. No, and I wouldn't be violent to anybody, and I never would. I just absolutely flat don't believe it in any part of that, and stealing, lying, or any of it.
David says that he spent his entire life trying to be the opposite of his father. Even towards the end of Thurston's life, he told his son, "You always were a do-gooder. No one will ever give a shit what you do. Let me assure you of that." After Thurston turned 85, he had a series of strokes. His reign of terror was coming to an end. But before he died, he reached for David's hand and said, "You were my favorite one. I love you, son. I always have." And David leaned over and said, "I always loved you too, Dad. Goodbye." And he walked away. I mean, I'm sorry you had to live this life, but it sounds like you've been very successful regardless, despite that.
Happily married, great kids. In my lobbying firm, we've had 300 interns that I've helped mentor. Life is good. I have 2 grandkids that are fantastic toddlers, good relationship with my siblings, lots of good things in my life, and I feel very lucky to have escaped it.
That's great.
To have broken the whole cycle and just be free and be happy.
This episode was written by me, Javier Leyva, and Audrey Gibbs. It was also edited by Punith Shenoy with the Podcast Pundits.
Creative Babble.